Bullshit.
Pretend for a moment we've entered a parallel universe, free of bullshit and full of bold solutions.
I can already tell this is going to be...
This is going to be
I can't even look at him without
the
laughing.
best one ever. That's what the OBS show is all about. I'm your host, Dave Mastovich. Our guest today is Amy Veltri, president of NGE Environmental. But first...
Actually, CEO. Yeah.
She's off to a great start.
I even had that right in my notes.
Graduation season brings excitement and reflection for new grads and pretty much the rest of us. Think back to your first job. You were excited, nervous, frustrated. Good memories and also embarrassing moments. Amy's going to tell us about a couple of hers as we get into the show. With that in mind, though, here are 9 no BS tips to help recent grads and maybe even some cagey veterans. Number 1, plan, prepare, practice. Whether you have a job interview, a staff meeting, a one-on-one with your boss, or you're just starting your day, invest time in planning, preparation, and practice. Write down your goals, build an action plan, role play various scenarios. Number 2, track your progress. What worked and what didn't. Write it down or enter it electronically. Refer back to learn and tweak future activities. Number 3, think about your social media presence. Millennials, peers, subordinates, and bosses can see your Facebook and Twitter posts. No cleavage shots, Amy. Action photos or blank images on LinkedIn. If you have any doubts about your social media activities, show mom. See what she thinks. Number 4, failures are necessary for growth. You'll learn more from mistakes than just about anything else. Number 5, work on understanding you. What makes you tick? Take a self-assessment like Myers-Briggs, DISC, or Predictive Index. Ask those who know you what they think. Then focus on finding opportunities that fit those characteristics and commit to personal growth. Number 6, for the new grads, listen. Most people aren't good listeners. Listen to the words and the inflection. Understand body language. Repeat back what you heard to confirm understanding. Make sure those around you know you're listening. Don't look at your smartphone or text while someone else is talking. Number 7, do more than is expected. Do what other people don't want to do. Do it when no one's looking. And don't expect a trophy for just being on the team. Mm-hmm. Number 8, build relationships. Create and maintain meaningful connections in all aspects of your life. Relationships are indispensable, not disposable. Number 9, don't compare yourself to others. I know that's pretty difficult. We all still do it. But worrying about where others are or what they're doing isn't productive. People exaggerate their stories anyway. Just look at Facebook. Regardless, be happy for them and create your own success. Our guest today is Amy Veltri, founder and CEO of NGE, an environmental and geotechnical engineering consulting firm. Amy has been named one of Pennsylvania's best 50 women in business. Her company's been recognized as the fastest growing engineering firm in Pittsburgh by the Pittsburgh Business Times. Women-owned Business of the Year in Western Pennsylvania by the U.S. Small Business Administration, and one of the fastest growing environmental services firms in the U.S. by Inc. magazine. Amy, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Amy. She's finally here,
I'm
Dave.
thrilled to be here.
What a impressive resume that we're going to dig into, and she changed things up for us. First time the guest had the courage to request something other than tequila, so we started the show off with fireballs.
Yeah, we need more.
We can do that. Amy, walk us through your educational background and your career journey.
Sure. So my educational background is I have a bachelor's and master's degree in civil engineering from West Virginia University.
From where?
WVU, the West Virginia University.
Is it? I thought it was like 13th grade.
Come on. Where did you go again? Remind me.
I didn't go to school. I'm self-taught.
Where did you go to?
I'm self-taught. I'm self-taught.
Oh, for God's
Okay,
sakes.
so moving on anyway. So after I graduated from college, I took a job with a large global environmental consulting firm called ERM. And I worked there for about 10 years. And after my experience there, I went into industry for a couple years. And then at that point, I started having my first kids and wanted a little bit more flexibility. So I ended up going back to consulting because I wanted the flexibility of having a family and a career, which has certainly been a struggle. So we can talk about that more as the interview goes on. But Basically, after going back to the consulting firm, I decided I was at a point where it felt like I was giving more than I was getting. So I decided to start my own company. And I was 35 when I started my own company, which I felt like was the minimum age for being credible enough and having enough experience to be able to offer the clients, credibility. And I had found a niche. So certainly being in engineering is a niche, but there's a lot, if you do research, there's a lot of small engineering firms out there. And for me, the niche was, I felt like I had a play with regards to state and federal contracting. And if you're a certified woman-owned business, there's a minimum requirement for, if anytime there's government dollars involved, there's a minimum requirement for woman or disadvantaged businesses. So that was my niche. That's really why I didn't want to go into business just to be another engineering firm. There's a million of those out there. I wanted to make sure I had a niche. So that's really why I decided to branch out on my own. So
a lot of cool stuff. Let's go back first to West Virginia University.
Let's go Mountaineers.
Talk about your experience there, other than burning couches.
I don't know what else there is to talk about.
And so you went both grad and undergrad there.
Yeah.
So did you go back to back, or did you work for a few years and then go?
So actually, my undergrad was at a small engineering college called West Virginia Institute of Technology in Montgomery, West Virginia. But now I say WVU because they are now owned by WVU. They're now WVU Institute of Technology.
Okay.
So I went to undergrad to a very small college. There were I think there were about 2,500 students there at that point, and that was a better fit for me. I'm a very social person.
Really?
So I really worried about going to the big college and getting lost in social experiences. So engineering, I think, is the hardest undergrad degree there is to get. So granted, you can go on and get, a medical degree or be an attorney. So once you're out of the 4-year school, once you're out of the bachelor's degree, there are certainly more difficult things. But as a 4-year degree, engineering is by far the most rigorous, the most difficult degree to get. So I wanted to make sure that I was able to stay focused. So I went to a smaller college where I could keep a bigger eye to studying as opposed to the social experience.
Wait. How did that go? Because I can't imagine you toning back the social aspect, and we'll leave it at that.
There just wasn't nearly as much opportunity for the social distractions at a college of several thousand students as there was at a college of 30,000 students. And certainly WVU is known for its social experiences. So I really think it worked for me. I think it was a smart decision at that point. What guided me to be that mature at that point, I'm not sure. Actually, when I started college, I was 17 because I have a late birthday. And I was a cheerleader, and I had to go away to cheerleading camp and I was 17, and I'll never forget being humiliated because my parents had to sign off on a waiver. So I'm in college, and I feel like this adult, this independent person, but my parents had to sign off on a waiver because I was still underage that I was allowed to go to cheerleading camp. So I certainly still combined the social experience. So I was a cheerleader. I was in a sorority. I was a little sis to a fraternity. I was very social, but there just weren't nearly as many social distractions at that small college as there were at a bigger college.
So then you go right to WVU for your master's?
No. So I did work for a year in between. So I took a job. I graduated in December of 1989, and I got a job right away. So I worked from December 89 through September, well, I guess really August of 90. So I started back to school in August. And actually, I was really torn. So I had decided that from an early age, I was interested as an engineer. I was still interested in business. So even at that age, so at that point, I guess I would have been 21 or 20, no, I think I was 22 when I graduated. I decided that I was interested in business, so I'd applied to get my MBA. I'd taken, is it the LSAT for your MBA?
GMAT.
Or the GMAT, okay.
You did well on it, I can tell.
Yes. I'm from West Virginia. What do you expect? I did, actually. And I got a scholarship to get my MBA. I don't remember. That was a long time ago.
It was lower than mine, trust me.
Yeah, I'm gonna look now.
Go ahead.
So I took my GMAT, got accepted to do my MBA at WVU because in that day and age, an engineering degree, and quit sexting, with an MBA was a very unique thing. So now it's actually much more common. And that's one thing I can talk about. I'm on the board of directors for the WVU School of Engineering. And that's one thing we've combined for engineering students is a 5-year degree that combines 4-year engineering degree plus an MBA for the same price as a 4-year engineering degree, which is a fantastic combination. So anyway, I'd been accepted to WVU to do my MBA. And that was 1990. And it was a big anniversary for Earth Day. I can't remember if it was 20 years or 25 years in 1990. And I ended up getting my name entered into a scholarship to do a master's degree in environmental engineering. And I won the scholarship. It was with General Electric, with GE. And it was a full ride to do my master's degree in environmental engineering at WVU.
How did you win that?
There were a handful of applicants and they interviewed, and it was just based on qualifications.
So it was based on merit. It wasn't like a luck, a draw.
Yeah, no.
She's a smart cookie.
She is.
If you haven't picked up on that.
I knew that coming in.
Yeah.
So anyway, I got a full scholarship to do my master's degree in environmental engineering, and it was a full ride. So my tuition and fees were waived, and I got paid to go to school. So at that point, I'm into my cars, as Dave knows. Right now, I drive a Porsche. At that point, I was driving a Nissan 300Z, and I didn't want to give that up. I was actually getting paid to go to school, so I was able to make my car payments while I was doing my master's degree, and I didn't have to work. So I decided, I actually had a hard time deciding because I really wanted to get my MBA. Felt like that was such a unique combination, and it really was at that point. Now, a lot more people coming out of engineering school are getting an MBA. But I decided to go with the free ride. How can you turn that down, right? And figured after that, if I want to still get my MBA, I can do that too. So I went and got my environmental engineering degree on the full scholarship, and definitely everything segued from there. I never went back to get my MBA, but I feel like at this point so I started my business myself from the ground up, and I feel like I have my MBA baptism by fire for sure. So
yeah,
it's incredible.
Yeah.
So let's go back to undergrad, and then we'll go into grad as well. The female aspect, the women in engineering. In the school, how many women were in the engineering?
I was the only female in my civil engineering graduate class. So you can imagine, so I go to Calc 3 class or to statics and dynamics, and I cheered all 4 years of my undergrad degree. So lots of times.
So is this cheering for actual WVU or this school, smaller
West
one,
Virginia
had their own
Tech,
team?
much smaller.
They had their own team.
Yes,
Okay.
much smaller scale.
Okay.
But we cheered for football and basketball. We traveled with the team. So not only did we practice 5 to 6 days a week, when the team went, we traveled with them on buses, on planes, on whatever. So I would go to class a lot of times because we had a game that night in my cheerleading uniform. So not only was I the only female in 95% of my classes, I'm in a cheerleading uniform. So I really stood out. So, which was fine. I will say I've never played the female card as a disadvantage. In my eyes, it's always been an advantage.
Yeah.
So.
Mm-hmm. And you're a guy at heart.
Don't tell my secrets.
I know Amy quite well, ladies and gentlemen. So then in the master's program, was it the same way or was it even worse? So you were the only one, you couldn't be
I was the only
worse. You
female in
only
my
female,
master's program too. Wow.
So then you come out and you end up with ERM for 10 years. Mm-hmm. Talk about that.
So a lot of good experience with them. ERM is a global, very high quality environmental engineering firm. Learned a lot from them. I really feel like they were my breeding ground for me to start my own company. They taught me a lot about doing good quality work, being very rigorous, client management, just a lot of really good experiences. A lot of tough experiences too. So you talked about your first job and so one of the things that, and I actually hadn't thought about this in prepping for this interview, but I actually had a very bad experience with a supervisor the first year. So they did a 6-month review after you first came on board. And that's something I've actually implemented too, because I find that useful. It's tough to wait for a year to get feedback from someone, especially when it's your first job or you're just starting out. So they did a 6-month review, and my supervisor at that point he was a real prick. Very, very hard on me. And he honed in on the fact that my technical writing, so I'm right out of college. I did have my master's degree at that point, but I'm right out of college. And as an engineer, you are not trained very well in writing, especially technical writing. And when you go into consulting, you have a lot of technical writing you have to do. So he called me out on the fact that my technical writing sucked. And it did. It was horrendous. And I'll never forget, I walked out of that review just crushed. And I didn't cry in front of him, but I went to the bathroom and cried. And that was like one of those defining moments in your career that I felt very vulnerable, but how you respond to stuff like that is what defines you. I feel like the tough moments are, you can either crumble or you can do something about it and move on. And I feel like that's where I've really, shined. That's awesome. So what I did after that, I came out of there and I'm like, okay, what do I do about this? And I started to do some research on technical writing. And I ended up taking night classes at CCAC on technical writing. And so I wasn't sure how much that would help me. It's CCAC, but it was very, very helpful. And now I feel like technical writing is one of my true strengths. So he called me to the carpet and he was right on. But I also felt like there were things he could have done to further me at that point. So he really didn't mentor me well. He critiqued me, but didn't say, this is what you could do. So at that point, it was up to me to determine how I was going to respond to that, because I didn't have a lot of guidance there in the workplace. And I responded, and I felt like I really, grew from that. So
It's the No BS Show. I'm your host, Dave Mastovich. That's Amy Veltri, CEO of NGE Environmental. Today's podcast is brought to you by Audible.com. If anybody out there has not yet tried Audible for your books, you have over 180,000 titles to choose from, and you can get a free trial if you enter audibletrial.com/nobs. audibletrial.com/nobs. Get a 30-day trial. Get to try some free books on Audible. It's fantastic. So Amy talked about her first job, and when she was told something that she was able to turn into a positive, and shows her personal growth aspirations by going and taking courses for it. That person didn't turn out to be a mentor. Have you had any mentors that you'd like to talk about?
Yeah, definitely. So first and foremost, when you ask me about mentors, what comes to mind is my father. So he started a business very similar to what mine is now. He was one of the founders of a company, an engineering firm that does geotechnical and environmental engineering. And the way that he's mentored me, he hasn't been a real in-your-face kind of mentor. And I have to say, when I started the company, that was a little bit disappointing. But now I've learned why he's done that. He wants me to figure things out on my own. But the way that he's mentored me is, and I really feel like everything you do comes back to the way you were raised and your parents. So my parents have taught me so many important things. My mom too, but my dad especially. My dad always treated everybody with respect and dignity. He always did the right thing, even if it meant it cost them money or it took longer to do. He just always did the right thing and treated everybody in the right way. And I learned so much from that. And I feel like I bring that to my everyday life in so many ways. So by far, my dad is my biggest mentor.
Great story. So it's the family business because NGE Environmental is you as the founder and CEO, but your brother is a key player.
Yep.
Your dad did the same thing.
Yep.
How did that happen? Like, how did your dad get started? And did you know it when you were 10, 12? Did you love what he did?
Not really. I guess when I was that young, I didn't really think a lot about it. Although when I was 15, I started working for him. So I really started in this business, as did my brother, probably when he was 15 too. So I started in the geotechnical and environmental business at 15, working in the lab, doing aggregate testing. As I got older, I went out into the field and did construction inspection when I was 18 and 19. So I started in the industry with him and being exposed to it. So really now when I look back to that experience brings a lot to where I am now. I understand my guys that are out in the field doing, construction inspection. I know exactly because that's where I started too. So I know exactly what they're doing. So I guess maybe the entrepreneurial spirit has always been there because I've seen that in my dad. I've seen him working hard and long hours and growing a business. But I don't think it was necessarily when I went out to work on my own, it didn't. I didn't have that in mind. It took until, like I said, I was in my mid-30s and I saw a niche and maybe a reason to do it. And I thought, yeah, maybe it makes sense. And he certainly encouraged me. And a lot of people think because he has done what he has done, that he was there funding me or, giving me advice on a daily basis. And that really hasn't been the case. And again, that's been a little bit of at times a disappointment, but for the most part, I understand why he's done that. He wants me to do it on my own he wants me to learn things on my own. And the same for my brother. So I'm 51% owner, my brother's 49, but we really operate as equal partners. So I want to make sure my brother has credit here too.
The No BS Marketing Podcast with Dave Mastovich is brought to you by Mass Solutions. Put our 3-step No BS process to work for you. Visit masssolutions.biz today to take your marketing to another level. It's all about bold solutions, no BS.
I like the point that you made about when you started your company. I was about the same age. You said you were 35 when you started your company. I was a year or so around that same time. Talk about that again, because I agree 100%, and I think we're the last generation where that's probably going to be the case. So talk about why you thought it was important that you had a certain level of experience.
Well, I mean, again, it just comes down to credibility. I think you don't know what you're doing until you have a certain amount of experience under your belt. If you have 5 years of experience, you think, and it is, I hate to talk about generations in generalities because it's not fair. And there's a lot of sharp kids coming up, but experience is experience. It just, you have to experience things and learn from them to get credibility and be able to handle things. And so for me, the minimum age felt like 35. So at that point I had almost, with my master's degree, a little bit more than 10 years experience under my belt. And that's still not a lot, but it obviously worked okay for me.
I had the same experience, and the reason I say that it's going to be we're the last generation to do that is you and I have all had that opportunity to hear speakers and so forth that talk about this, but statistically, the millennials are coming in when the boomers are retiring, so the millennials are going to have 2 jobs offers for every person, and they're also in an environment which is much faster paced, with the internet, they grew up on that, and decisions are made faster today. So what we thought we had to be, say, 35 to start a business, now it might be 25, and it's really kind of, it's going to be interesting and scary and exciting, I guess, all at the same time.
Yeah. And for me, I say good for them. If they can go out there and do it and be successful, I'm all about supporting them. But I also feel like you have to have a certain level of experience, again, to be credible and to be able to handle certain situations. So,
I agree.
Yeah.
There's certainly something to be said for maturity. It's actually part of
you and I don't have maturity, but
yeah, it's true. It's true. So speaking of bullshit, give me an example from the past. It could be a company culture, questionable leadership, or poor work ethic. A time when you just had to say, that's BS.
Okay. So I thought about this one, and I have to say, I talk about my upbringing. So I had a very, very good upbringing. My parents really are responsible for who I am today. And I hit the lotto when it came to parents. I couldn't have better parents. So I think lots of times I tend to be naive when it comes to people or situations. I have a lot of trust in people. I have a lot of faith in people. And I'm not good, I think, at smelling BS. And that's somewhere where I need to hone my skills better. And they've gotten better as I've gotten older, but I have a lot of trust in people. I'm naive.
I would not describe Amy Veltri as naive. How about you, Suze?
I am.
I'm not going to judge because I can totally hear where she's coming from.
But
she wants to see the best in people.
I do. I'm naive when it comes to people. But so there was one, so I thought about this, and there was one situation with, so I think I'd mentioned we have various certifications from a standpoint of being a woman-owned business. And one of the certifications we had was 8A. It's called 8A, Small Disadvantaged Business. It's with the SBA. And that gives you a very big leg up when it comes to certain federal contracts. A lot of federal contracts are set aside for 8A businesses. And if you're not in the 8A program, you can't even bid on them.
Is it the number 8?
8 and then A in parentheses, small disadvantaged business. So it's a very difficult program to get into. It's once in a lifetime. So I could not go start another business and get into 8A again. And you're in 9 years and then you graduate. So we've already graduated from it. And we had an opportunity with the Army Corps in Baltimore on an 8A set-aside. And the beautiful thing about 8A is they're set-asides. If you're qualified for them, you get them. You don't compete. You don't talk about price. You're awarded the contract. So it's a way of the government kind of investing in businesses that are disadvantaged.
So these are government projects.
These are federal government projects. The 8A program is a federal government-driven program.
Okay.
So, and we actually ran a very successful 8A. We had an 8A set-aside, or still to this day, our single biggest contract in the company, multi-year, multi-million-dollar contract that we very successfully completed. But once we graduated from 8A, we lost it because it was a set-aside and they had to give it to another 8A. But anyway, the one time that I felt like I was really naive and vulnerable was it was an 8A set-aside, and it was with the Army Corps in Baltimore, and there was an engineering firm that came to us and said, we want to partner with you on this project. And as an 8A, we had to self-perform at least 51% of the work because it was a set-aside. And I said, I'm in. I feel like I looked at the scope of work. I felt like we could self-perform 51% of it. We'll pursue it with you. And we were awarded the project. And this engineering firm I didn't have a relationship with the Army Corps in Baltimore at that point, and this firm did. And a couple months later, not a whole lot was going on. I thought it was a real fast-tracked project. So I reached out actually to the Army Corps and found out that the project had kicked off. We weren't even made aware of it. We were just a pass-through at that point for this company because it was an 8A set-aside, we weren't even made aware that the project kicked off. And that was a place where my naivety played in. I didn't realize that was going to happen. I flipped out.
Oh my God.
My name is on that contract, my company's name, my reputation, and I had no idea what was even going on with the project. And that was completely unacceptable to me. So I made that clear to the client, made that clear to the engineering firm, and we dealt with it and insisted that we self-performed at least 51% of the work. And it was an extremely difficult relationship at that point. Nobody was happy.
What do you think they would have done if you would have just sat back? Were they going to charge you
That's
more
what
than the
they expected.
51%?
I think
that is what
or were
they
they just going to
expected.
give you a big cut for doing nothing?
Yeah. And that's not acceptable to me. I mean, again, my name and my reputation's on the line. So I guess that goes on a lot. I don't know. But that's not acceptable to me.
Good for you. Yeah.
She nailed some bullshit there.
Yeah, she did.
So that was one time where I really felt taken advantage of and didn't tolerate it. But I didn't even know it was going on for a while.
Suzanne looks fired up. She's ready to go fight them for you.
I'm not going to mention their name. But
Amy would win. She got it. She's got it.
Amy, talk
Time flies when you're having
about
fun.
a learning experience when maybe you were the BS employee, the tough boss, or maybe your communication wasn't what it needed to be. Looking back, when do you think you might have been guilty of some BS?
So I think early on when I founded the company and maybe we were a little bit more hungry for growth, I tried to overextend us and say we were capable of doing some things that we couldn't do. And we maybe fell down on a few projects, although, again, I'm very, very picky about that, very picky about our reputation. So I learned very quickly to say no to things. I think that's a very hard thing, especially when you're starting out or you're hungry for business, to say no to something you know you can't do a good job at. And I learned from saying yes to something I should have said no to. So at this point, I have no problems with saying, nope, we can't do that, and making sure. So I found out what's so important is performing and performing well and making sure that a client's going to come back. So
hear more of my conversation with Amy Veltri, the president of NGE Environmental, in episode 2.